Congratulations on the new record. It's doing very, very well
Thank
here.
you.
The fact that you're from Australia makes your love of country music such an interesting thing.
Mm-hmm.
How were you first introduced to country music when you were a boy?
Well, for me, it was my dad's record collection. He was a big country fan from when he was a kid, and the records he had were predominantly Don Williams and Charlie Pride, Jim Reeves, Glenn Campbell, Merle Haggard. And so when I started playing guitar when I was 6, I just copied whatever I heard around the house. So I started playing songs like Wichita Lineman and Galveston, all that sort of stuff.
So it was mostly just your home influence, and
yeah.
Were you pulled in other directions though musically, with like, your friends listening to rock and roll or anything?
Well, you know, top 40 radio then was so diverse. You could hear, you know, Jethro Tull next to the Doobie Brothers, or Led Zeppelin, and then the Beatles, and then it was great. You know, it's a real diverse way to grow up with music.
As a young man, you were doing quite well with a 3-piece band, I believe, in Australia. You guys have had a few #1 singles over there. What finally made you decide to move to Nashville?
Well, when I was a kid, I used to see Nashville, Tennessee written on the back of all my dad's records, and so I thought, oh, that's where you go to make records.
Right.
So, you know, ever since I was probably 7 or 8 years old, I just thought that's where I'm going to move to one day. I didn't know when or how. I just knew that's where I wanted to go.
How did it affect your songwriting? Did living in the city finally? How did that actually?
I got signed to MCA Publishing back in 1990, and started making trips over to Nashville for the next few years on songwriting trips. So I'd fly over and stay for a couple of weeks, and they have this Music Row, which is the main business area of Nashville. And that's where all the songwriting buildings are and record companies. And I would drive down to Music Row Monday to Friday and go songwriting. You know, meet somebody you've never met before and sit down and write songs. It was kind of an intimidating time because I didn't, you know, this is such a foreign kind of way to songwrite for me. But it was a great learning experience too. You get to learn a lot from people, how they come at songwriting.
Did you come to Nashville with the intention of forming a group? Because ultimately, I know you did. You formed the Ranch.
Yeah. No, I've always had my own backing band. Being a guitarist, you kind of got to have a band, and so I actually had a 5-piece band in Australia, but I couldn't afford to bring everybody. So it was a 3-piece out of economical reasons, and stayed that way for economical reasons. The minimum I could bring, of course, was bass and drums.
Right.
So we ended up becoming, you know, the cream of country. It was very bizarre.
How did the city react to having this, you know, this man from Australia coming into, you know, Nashville to do this American music? Was there any kind of hesitation when you were trying to write with people from the city?
There was, I think there was a lot of resistance, but I certainly didn't see any of it. But, you know, as the years went by and I slowly got more supporters in Nashville, I found out just how absurd most of the town thought it was when I came. And I can understand why, you know, because when you come across, you know, you have those sort of, you're very focused and confident, and you hit this kind of brick wall of support, of lack of support, I should say. And I probably, you know, people always ask me, did you think about turning around and going back to Australia? And that never occurred to me, because it's almost like I've been brainwashed since I was a kid that that's where I go to make records, and nothing was going to deviate me from that, because that's not what was written. What was written was for me to go to Nashville. So all the obstacles were just that, obstacles to get around.
And you felt completely comfortable in the city?
Yeah, yeah. I was sort of. I spent the first 6 years of my life in the city, in Brisbane, in Australia, which is about 2 million people, and then when I was about 6 or 7, moved to a country town about an hour and a half outside of Brisbane, and grew up on a farm there.
At what point did the Ranch fall apart? Did the group The Ranch?
It was in beginning of '98. And it was a lot of reasons. There wasn't one single reason why it was time to call it a day, but it just was. And I'd been a solo artist before, so it wasn't, you know, completely unusual for me to get back to doing that. And there's a certain limitation you have when you're in a band to, if everybody collectively is going to move in the same direction musically, then that's great. But of course, the Ranch was, as I say, born out of a backing band, so it wasn't formed as a, you know, democratic band.
So you didn't encounter any kind of intimidation going back into the solo world now that you're leaving the actual band behind?
It was a little nerve-wracking for me, because I'd been with the band for so long, and I had to remember, it was, you know, how to ride the bike again. And I fell off a few times and skinned a few knees, but eventually regained my composure.
Obviously, the success of the record like it says it all. But right after the Ranch disbanded, your guitar playing, the skill that you have, the word started to spread, and you were getting phone calls from a lot of, you know, heavy hitters there. You got a call from Garth Brooks.
Yeah.
To play on which
Double-
album?
Double
the
Live,
Double Live
yeah.
album. How did you react to that particular call?
Those kind of things are always overwhelming to me, and my first thought is just sheer nervousness, and then my second, thought is, okay, what time do I have to be there? and I never went seeking session work in Nashville. It's not something I went to do, and I'm also very, what's the word? I understand that's a certain group of people unto itself, and it's not something you want to encroach on, because you can get certain vibes from people they've gone to be a session player, and if you just zip into that, it's kind of like these recording artists who get a record deal, and the next year they're doing a big film for some big film company out here, and these actors are just going, what the, get in line kind of thing. And I feel that way about session players, so I've been very careful to not pursue that, but to be asked to play on records is a totally different thing, and that's, in the case of Garth, it was just come in and do that thing you do. And the Dixie Chicks, when they covered a song off the Ranch album called Some Days You Gotta Dance, they just called me up and said, come and play what you played on the Ranch record. Of course, when I got in there, I realised that the song's in a totally different key, which really threw me, and actually we'll probably cover that a little bit when we start playing.
Oh, very good, very good. How important do you think it is to blur the lines between country music and pop music?
I don't know whether that's of any importance to me other than to just do what comes natural to me, and let it find its own place.
So you don't put any conscious effort into trying to make a song that might cross over when you're actually writing music?
Oh gosh, no.
You just focus on the actual song and leave everything else.
I focus on the song, and for me, what I think, to my ears, sounds the best representation of that song. When we did the Ranch record, I wanted banjo on a couple of tracks, not because it's a country instrument, but because I love that texture, and it's such a, it's a very rhythmic instrument. As much as a textural instrument, it's very rhythmic because of the way you pick it and arpeggios and that sort of thing. And I can't play banjo because it's a 5-string, it's tuned differently, and so I thought, but I don't want to get a banjo player in and have to explain my ideas. I know exactly what I want in my head, and this is something musicians go through every day, is the frustration of knowing what you want but not being able to physically get on the piano or the guitar and play it. And I thought, man, I wish I could find a 6-string banjo tuned like a guitar. And that day I went into this music store, and there it was on this guitar stand. It was like the holy grail. I almost heard this, shining down on it. And it was a 6-string banjo tuned just like a guitar, and affectionately called a ganjo. And so I went in and put that on a track on the Ranch record, and it was the sound I was looking for. So I ended up putting it on a lot of tracks on that record. And it was, the songs could have been fine without it, but for me and what I was looking for, that instrument really made it sound right to me.
You mentioned something very interesting a second ago about how frustrating it is to try and convey your creative process to somebody who doesn't know what you're thinking. How do you ultimately do that when you can't, let's say you can't find that specific banjo, or you want to hear something on the piano? How do you express that to another musician?
What I used to do was just play the part on guitar, and explain, I wanted to kind of do this part, or even to just double the guitar part, and then hopefully the banjo player would understand that. But I think it's just something that sometimes it just goes frustrated and just stays that way, and you end up settling for something. But often that takes it to another level too that you wouldn't have taken it to.
Right.
So it's a tough call. That one.
Your album seems to be very specifically focused on matters of the heart. Do these songs serve as some kind of catharsis for you?
It was a therapeutic record to make for me, definitely. I didn't set out to make an indulgent record at all, but I think in the end it turned out to be a record that is universally understood as far as matters of the heart, which is kind of a universal subject. But the songs that felt most compelling to me all had that theme to them, I guess. My favourite records are records that are documents of where an artist is at that time in their life, because that's why it's a recording, it's a document of where you're at. And if you go in and make it honestly and accurately, it's captured a moment in time. And that's what I felt we did with this record.
And well done, too.
Thank you.
It also featured, one of the songs on the album is co-written by Charlotte Caffrey and Jane Wiedlin from the Go-Go's, which seems like an unlikely grouping of songwriters there, with you in the mix there. How did you wind up working together with them?
A mutual friend of mine and Jane came to town. The girls were coming to town, and this guy called me up and said, "Do you want to write with Jane and Charlotte?" And my first thought was, what am I going to write with the Go-Go's? With all due respects, I'm in Nashville and I'm trying to write for this record, and I just couldn't see us writing anything. But sometimes you just got to open yourself up to the possibility, which I did. We sat in a room and tossed around all these ideas, and nothing was really going anywhere. And then Charlotte suggested the title, But for the Grace of God, which I loved. And I grabbed my guitar and started playing a melody and singing some gibberish. And Jane started scribbling lyrics. And she read out the first verse, which I loved, and we talked about the rest of the story. And the song was born relatively quickly. So perseverance sometimes is a good thing.
You think you'd work with them again?
I think so, because in the end it was a great process. Yeah.
Do you prefer writing with a partner or writing alone more?
They're both good.
They're both good.
I think sometimes when you write with a partner, you do have to compromise to some degree. Mm-hmm. And there's always that balance of being open-minded and being scattered, or being focused or being stubborn. And there's such little fine areas. And when it comes to lyrics and songs, if you're working with somebody, and I'm the person who's going to be singing it, you imagine ultimately you should have the last say in the lyric. It's got to be something that I believe in. Right. I always remember that line in the Beatles song, the movement you need is on your shoulder, which Paul said was just a filler line, and John said, no, you got to keep that. It's the best line in the whole song. And John said, well, I don't even know what it means. And Paul said, well, I do. So who knows?
Right, right. What do you think is the biggest misconception about country music?
I think that it's just, to a large portion of the population, that it's still hats and Wranglers. And I always get the old, well, you don't look like a country singer. Hopefully that's going to change over the course of the next few years. I don't see any reason why, why men can't dress as fashionably as some of the women do. There's no reason.
Right, right. Very good. Well, I see you have your guitar right there, so I was hoping you'd do a little song for us before we wrap it up.
Sure, I will.
Fantastic.
I'll just pick a little something for you. I'm a real fan of the chicken picking style, which is kind of, it goes back probably to James Burton, who played with Elvis, and Albert Lee is a master at it. But it's mostly, I tend to not use my pick very much, and if I do, I slip it into this to there and use mostly my fingers to get that picking stuff.